In the 19th century, the British Empire controlled territories across the globe. Its warships ruled the seas, its merchants dominated global trade, and its soldiers enforced imperial power from Asia to Africa. But along the rivers, forests, and kingdoms of what is now Nigeria, the empire encountered something unexpected: resistance. Not from scattered tribes, as colonial narratives would later claim, but from powerful rulers, wealthy merchants, and organized states determined to defend their sovereignty. Some fought with armies, some fought with strategy, some fought with trade, and for decades, they forced the British Empire into battles it never anticipated. This is the story of the African leaders who challenged imperial power. Long before colonial borders were drawn, the region now called Nigeria was home to powerful and sophisticated states. The vast Sokoto Caliphate governed millions across the savannas of West Africa. In the forests and coastal lagoons, the Yoruba kingdoms controlled trade routes, linking the interior to the Atlantic world. Along the Niger Delta, merchant rulers built thriving city-states fueled by palm oil, ivory, and regional commerce. These were not passive societies waiting for European rule. They were political powers. And when British traders and gunboats began pushing deeper into their territories, many leaders refused to surrender their authority. By the mid-1800s, British interest in West Africa had shifted. The transatlantic slave trade was declining, but a new economic opportunity had emerged: palm oil. Essential for lubricating the machines of the Industrial Revolution, palm oil became one of the most valuable commodities in global trade. Control of the Niger Delta meant control of that wealth. British merchants wanted unrestricted access to the interior, but powerful African rulers controlled the rivers, the ports, and the trade networks, and they were not willing to give them up. So diplomacy slowly gave way to pressure. Pressure gave way to gunboats, and gunboats gave way to war. But what the British Empire discovered in the rivers of the Niger Delta was something it had rarely encountered before: a warlord who knew the waterways better than any naval officer. A leader who turned the empire's greatest advantage, its gunboats, into a deadly weakness. His name was Nana Alamo, and his resistance would shock the British Empire.
A British officer stationed in the Niger Delta sits alone, drafting a confidential report to London. His tone is careful, but his message is unmistakable.
Navigation unsafe, trade obstructed, gunboats unable to operate freely. Nana Olomu remains defiant.
This was not the language of victory. It was the language of an empire discovering resistance it did not expect. Because by the late 19th century, British gunboats were supposed to end conversations, not start them. Wherever they appeared, treaties followed. Trade opened. African authority collapsed. Except here, in the rivers of the Niger Delta, British gunboats stalled. Routes were blocked. Cargo delayed. Ships damaged. Not an open battle on the high seas, but in narrow, hostile waterways controlled by an African power broker who understood those rivers better than any European commander ever could. His name was Nana Olomu, and while British records never like to use the word defeat, they repeatedly admit something far more revealing. Their gunboats were neutralized, disabled, forced back, rendered ineffective. In imperial language, this is called obstruction. In reality, it was a strategic sinking of British power. Not just ships, but confidence. And that is why this story matters. Because before Britain claimed Nigeria without resistance, before colonial textbooks softened conquest into administration, there was a Nigerian warlord who turned British gunboats into liabilities, and Britain made sure most of the world would never hear his name. By the late 19th century, Britain's empire did not run on gold. It ran on palm oil. Palm oil greased machines, powered factories, fueled the Industrial Revolution. And no region on Earth supplied more palm oil than the Niger Delta. But there was a problem. Britain did not control the rivers. African states did. Long before colonization, riverine powers, Itsekiri, Ijaw, or Hobo, governed trade with military precision. European ships could not move inland without permission. Trade passed through African hands, and Britain hated intermediaries. Nana Olomu was born around 1852 into an Itsekiri trading family near the Benin River. He did not inherit kingship. He inherited opportunity. As a young man, Nana entered the palm oil economy and mastered it. He studied river navigation, European bargaining tactics, the politics of tolls, access, and choke points. By his early 30s, Nana Olomu was one of the wealthiest merchants in the Delta. But wealth was not the goal. Control was. With his profits, Nana Olomu did something Britain did not expect. He militarized commerce. He armed private soldiers, built fleets of war canoes, established fortified river checkpoints. Every barrel of palm oil passed through his territory. By the late 1880s, British officials privately referred to him as
the most influential native authority in the Western Delta.
Translation: he controlled Britain's lifeline. In 1886, Britain outsourced conquest. The Royal Niger Company was granted power to wage war, sign treaties, administer territory. It was empire disguised as business. Company officials moved aggressively, forcing African rulers to sign treaties surrendering trade rights. Most complied. Nana Olomu did not. He read the documents. He understood exactly what they meant. Total loss of sovereignty. Between 1887 and 1893, Nana Olomu executed one of the most effective resistance campaigns in West African history. Not open war, economic warfare. He blocked British traders, closed waterways, enforced tolls, mobilized armed escorts. British ships were harassed, cargo delayed, profits collapsed. Internal British letters describe him as
a serious obstruction to free trade.
Free trade was empire's favorite lie. In 1894, Britain escalated. Gunboats entered Nana's territory. But the Niger Delta was not the open sea. It was a maze. Nana's forces used hidden channels, shallow waters, surprise attacks. British vessels were damaged, crews demoralized. This was not folklore. It appears in colonial correspondence. An African leader had turned Britain's greatest weapon into a liability. Unable to defeat him militarily, Britain reverted to strategy, divide and rule. Rivals were bribed, allies pressured. Nana was isolated. In 1894, he was captured, not tried, not defeated, removed, exiled to Accra, far from the rivers that made him powerful. Within months, British control tightened, trade monopolized, resistance collapsed. After Nana Olomu's exile, African middlemen disappeared, company rule expanded, colonial administration accelerated. By 1900, southern Nigeria was firmly under British authority. Nana Olomu had been the final barrier. And then Britain did something calculated. They erased him. No monuments, no textbooks, no national memory. Because Nana Olomu shattered the imperial myth. He proved Africans, understood empire, resisted intelligently, nearly stopped it. So ask yourself, if Nana Olomu was insignificant, why was he exiled? If Africans never resisted, why were gunboats sent? If colonialism was peaceful, why was trade disrupted, treaties forced, leaders removed? This channel exists for one reason: to restore the history's empire buried. If this story changed how you see Nigeria's past, like this video, share it with someone who was never taught this. Subscribe to Echoes of the Ancients, because empire survives on silence, and memory is resistance. They controlled the maps, but he controlled the rivers. January 2nd, 1852. Inside a British naval ship anchored off the coast of West Africa, Commodore Henry Bruce is writing a classified dispatch to London. His hands are shaking. This was not the confident voice of an empire at its peak. It was the voice of a commander who had just discovered something Britain wasn't prepared to admit to the world.
Resistance beyond expectations. Lagos not compliant. Situation unstable. King Kosoko must be removed at all costs.
But here's what they never told you in the history books. The man Britain feared, the king who refused their treaties, the ruler who stood between the British Empire and total control of West Africa, was not some obscure local chief. He was King Kosoko, the last Lagosian monarch to challenge Britain head-on. And this is the story the British tried to bury beneath treaties and carefully edited colonial narratives. To understand why Britain wanted Kosoko gone, why they were willing to bombard an entire city, overthrow a dynasty, and rewrite the history of Lagos, we need to go back. Back before the gunboats, before the treaties, before the word colony ever appeared on a British map. Back to a kingdom Britain desperately wanted to control, but could never fully understand. The year is 1830. While Europe celebrates its industrial revolution and Britain expands across continents, there is a city on the West African coast whose power defies everything London expected. Lagos! Not the Legos you know today. A lagoon fortress, a commercial hub linking the entire Bight of Benin. A multi-ethnic port ruled by Yoruba kings, influenced by Benin, and connected to Afro-Brazilian merchants returning from the Americas. By the 1840s, Lagos controlled trade routes stretching deep into Yoruba land. Whoever ruled Lagos controlled wealth, influence, and regional power. And standing at the center of this world was Korsor, prince of the royal house of Ologun Kutera. Ambitious, strategic, and respected by warriors across the region. But Kosoko's story begins not with triumph, but betrayal. Lagos politics were brutal long before the British arrived. Succession in Lagos wasn't simply about who was the eldest or most qualified. It was about alliances with chiefs, warriors, spiritual leaders, and powerful trade families. And in 1845, the struggle for the throne turned violent. Kosoko's uncle, Oba Osinlokan, had seized power years earlier through force. When Osinlokan died, his son Adewu Ojulari became king, but he was despised. The chiefs forced him to commit suicide. Lagos was thrown into chaos. The throne became a battlefield. Kosoko, with massive support from war chiefs and Brazilian returnee merchants, was the favorite. But there was one man who stood in his way. Akitoye, his uncle, older, cautious, and determined to rule. What followed was one of the most dramatic power struggles in Lagos history. Akitoye clinched the throne in 1841, but his position was fragile. Kosoko was too popular, too connected, too powerful. So Akitoye tried to eliminate him. The attempt failed. Korsakor fled the city, but he did not disappear. He regrouped. He built alliances. He gathered a loyal army. And in 1845, he returned. His forces stormed Lagos in a ferocious battle known as Ogun Olomiro, the Saltwater War. Akitoye fled. Korsakor became king. This was the beginning of Britain's problem. To London, Lagos was more than a city. It was the gateway to West Africa. And Britain wanted one thing: control of the Atlantic coast to enforce its anti-slave trade policy, or at least that was the official story. But the truth was darker and far more strategic. Internal British documents reveal the real motives: control trade, break West African coastal alliances, secure influence over Yoruba hinterlands, establish a military presence, outmaneuver rivals like France and Portugal. Korsokor was a problem because he refused to sign British treaties. He refused British missionaries. He refused to surrender Lagosian independence. They described him in secret reports as hostile to British interests. Translation: he wouldn't let Britain control the port. Korsokor remained aligned with Afro-Brazilian merchants and maintained a foreign policy that didn't bend to London. Britain needed someone more cooperative, someone like Akitoye, and so the empire made a decision that would reshape Nigerian history. Korsokor must be removed, at any cost. 1849. The British West Africa Squadron arrives off the Lagos coast. London claimed they were coming to end the slave trade. But their real plan was political intervention, carefully disguised as humanitarianism. Akitoye, exiled in Abeokuta, sensed opportunity. He wrote desperate letters to the British.
Restore me to my rightful throne, and I will sign whatever treaty you desire.
This was exactly what Britain wanted. The moment Akitoye promised cooperation, the British strategy solidified. British officers wrote,
Korsoko cannot be reasoned with. Akitoye is favorable to British interests.
And so the plan was set. Akitoye would return. The British would help him. Lagos would fall. December 1851, British warships, the HMS Bloodhound and HMS Teaser, positioned themselves at the Lagos Lagoon. They demanded Kosoko surrender. He refused. The British opened fire. For 3 straight days, they bombarded Lagos with naval artillery. This was the first major British military intervention on Nigerian soil. Kosoko's forces responded with ferocity Britain did not expect. War songs filled the air. Warriors fortified the beaches. Gunners fired from hidden positions across the lagoon. The British expected an easy victory. They were wrong. Korsorkor's defenders inflicted severe damage. The British suffered heavy casualties. The resistance was so intense that officers recorded,
Unexpected strength, serious obstruction to British aims. Lagos must be subdued completely.
On December 26, the British launched their full assault, a brutal marine invasion known as the Bombardment of Lagos. Buildings burned. Civilians fled. The lagoon turned red. But Korsokor refused to surrender. His warriors fought street by street, house by house, refusing to let Britain turn Lagos into another colonial outpost. After a week of fierce fighting, Kosoko realized the city could not survive continued bombardment. He retreated, not in defeat but to preserve his people. Akitoye was installed as king. The British declared victory. But the war was not over. Not even close. Korsokor fled to Epe with hundreds of loyal followers. And there he established a rival kingdom, fully armed, highly organized, and still determined to reclaim Lagos. British reports called him
a persistent threat, a danger to commerce, a king who will not accept displacement.
Korsokor forged alliances with Awari towns. He rebuilt his forces. He disrupted British trade routes. London panicked. If Korsoko returned, all their plans for regional control, trade, influence, political dominance would collapse. So Britain rewrote the narrative. Korsokor was described as a tyrant. Officials portrayed him as a villain. Akitoye was painted as a peaceful king who invited British protection. But secret correspondence tells a different story.
Korsoko commands loyalty. Lagosians prefer him. His influence growing, must neutralize him permanently.
The British used treaties, pressure, and regional alliances to isolate him, and yet he endured. Kosoko remained powerful enough that Britain eventually negotiated with him directly. By 1854, he secured a treaty guaranteeing his safety and authority in Ephe. He had survived the full weight of the British Empire. When Lagos officially became a British colony in 1861, textbooks and colonial reports framed it as a peaceful cession, a voluntary signing, a humanitarian effort. But the internal British documents tell another story. Gunboat intimidation, economic blockades, deposition of local rulers, manipulation of internal politics, strategic suppression of Kosoko's legacy. Kosoko was not a footnote. He was the central obstacle to British control of Nigeria's most important port. So Britain erased him from the narrative. They painted Akitoye and later Dosunmu as uncontested rulers. They reduced the Lagos War to a minor skirmish. But the reality stands. Korsor was the last independent king of Lagos, the last monarch to face Britain as an equal, the last ruler whose authority was not shaped by colonial interests. And his resistance forced Britain to spend years, money, and military resources they never wanted to admit publicly. Kosoko lost the city, but he won something far more important. He proved that Lagos did not fall easily. It was taken through force, politics, and imperial ambition. Kosoko eventually reconciled with Lagos under British rule. He received the title Oloja of Eriko and remained influential until his death in 1872. But his true legacy lived elsewhere, in the memory of Lagosians who knew the truth, in the families who passed down stories of resistance, in the monuments that honored the warriors who defended the city, in the deep pride of a people who refused to surrender their autonomy. Today, most of the world knows nothing about the Lagos War, nothing about the bombardment, nothing about Kosorko's defiance. But now you do, because history is not always written by the victors. Not really. History is written by those who survive, those who remember, and those who refuse to let their stories disappear. Kosoko may have lost his throne, but he won immortality. His resistance forced Britain to reveal its motives. His defiance shattered the myth of easy conquest. His legacy lives in every Lagosian who still carries the pride of a city that refused to bow. This is not just the story of a king. It is the story of Lagos, a city that fought, a kingdom that resisted, a people who refused to vanish, and now the world knows. This is the Lagos War. This is King Kosoko versus Britain. And this is the history they tried to bury. And here on Echoes of the Ancients, we bring these buried histories back to life. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, don't just watch, join us. Hit subscribe, share this film, and help us amplify the voices history tried to silence. Because the past is not dead. Its echoes are still calling.
By the late 19th century, the British Empire believed its expansion into West Africa was inevitable. But the reality on the ground was far more complicated. Across the region, African leaders were resisting British control in very different ways. Some fought with armies, some fought with strategy, and some fought with economic power. Together, their resistance formed a pattern the empire struggled to overcome. In Lagos, King Kosoko resisted British interference with military force. When British ships bombarded the city in 1851, the conflict became one of the earliest clashes between an African kingdom and European naval power in the region. Kosoko's resistance demonstrated that colonial expansion would not come easily. Further east, another leader chose a different battlefield. King Jaja of Apobo did not rely on cannons or cavalry. He relied on trade. By controlling the palm oil markets of the Niger Delta, Jaja built a commercial empire that rivaled European trading companies. And when British merchants attempted to bypass him, he blocked their access to the interior. His weapon was economic power, and it worked. Meanwhile, in the maze-like waterways of the Niger Delta, Nana Alamu fought a different kind of war. He knew every channel, every mangrove passage, every hidden route through the delta. British gunboats were powerful in open water, but in these narrow rivers, they became vulnerable, and Nana Alamu used that advantage to devastating effect. These leaders fought in different ways, but their message was the same. Africa was not surrendering its sovereignty without resistance. And beyond the forests and coastal kingdoms, an even larger power stood in the interior, a vast Islamic state that governed millions, the Sokoto Caliphate.
In the age when European empires carved Africa into colonies, one man stood in their way. He was not born into power. He was not born into privilege. In fact, he began life as a slave, torn from his family, stripped of his name. And yet, through wit, courage, and ambition, he rose to become one of the wealthiest and most powerful rulers of the Niger Delta. He built a kingdom from trade, commanded fleets of canoes, and turned palm oil into an empire of his own making. His defiance was so great that Britain, the most powerful empire on earth, feared him. This is the story of King Jaja of Opobo, the merchant king who defied the British and paid the ultimate price. Our story begins in Amegbo, a small Igbo town in southeastern Nigeria. Around 1821, a boy was born here, Mbanaso Okwara Ozurumba. His childhood should have been one of farming, festivals, and family. But fate had other plans. As a child, he was seized and sold into bondage. He was marched away, never to see his home again. His destination was Boni, one of the great trading city-states of the Niger Delta. Here, the economy ran on palm oil, the liquid gold of the 19th century. It powered Europe's factories and greased the wheels of the Industrial Revolution. The Delta was a world of fierce merchant houses, each battling for dominance over rivers and trade. Into this ruthless arena came Mbanaso, stripped of his name and identity. He entered the house of Anna Peppel, one of Boni's wealthiest merchant families. While others carried loads, he carried knowledge. He memorized accounts, studied the flow of trade, and watched how power moved through ships and silver. By his late teens, this former servant was no longer invisible. He had risen to become a trusted figure in the Anna Peppel household. Soon he would earn a new name, one that would echo across history: Jaja. In Boni, power belonged to those who controlled trade. Jadga's brilliance in commerce made him indispensable. He rose from servant to leader, mastering diplomacy and trade alike. But Boni was a city divided. Rivalries between powerful houses split the kingdom into factions, Anna Peppel against Manila Peppel. Conflict erupted, and Jaja found himself caught in the middle. Refusing to be swallowed by these rivalries, Jaja made a daring move. In the 1860s, he broke away, leading his followers eastward to found a new settlement. On the banks of the Imo River, he established a city of his own, Opobo. From the very beginning, Opobo was a kingdom built for trade. Jaja secured strategic waterways, cut off Boni's access to the interior, and soon dominated the palm oil trade routes. By the 1870s, Opobo was exporting thousands of tons of oil annually, directly to British firms. European merchants called him King Jaja, recognizing both his power and his independence. He was no mere middleman. He dictated terms, set prices, and even refused European attempts to undercut African traders. To the people of Opobo, he was more than a king. He was proof that dignity and prosperity could rise from bondage. A slave boy had become a sovereign, commanding fleets and building a kingdom with the wealth of his own hands. But Jaja's success drew the attention of Britain. By the late 19th century, the British were no longer content with trading. They wanted control. As the scramble for Africa began, the Niger Delta became a prize too valuable to ignore. Britain sought to break the monopoly Jaja had created. They demanded free access to interior markets, but Jaja refused. He understood that surrendering his control meant surrendering his people's future. When the British pressed harder, Jaja imposed his own regulations, levying duties on European traders. He was not afraid to challenge the empire directly. To London, this was intolerable. Newspapers painted him as arrogant, unreasonable, and dangerous. But in reality, he was protecting African trade from European domination. Jaja had built Opobo into a fortress of commerce and independence. Yet the very strength that sustained him was what made the British determined to bring him down. By 1887, Britain made its move. The consul invited King Jaja aboard the warship HMS Goshawk, claiming they wished to negotiate peacefully. For a man who valued diplomacy, refusal was unthinkable. Jaja boarded the ship with regal dignity, but it was a trap. The moment talks began, orders were given. The king of Opobo was surrounded, shackled, and taken prisoner. His people waited at the docks, expecting their king's return. Days turned into weeks, but he never came back. Jaja was shipped into exile, first to the West Indies, then to St. Vincent and Barbados. Thousands of miles from home, he lived out his years in enforced silence. Yet even in exile, Jaja remained unbroken. He wrote letters pleading for the right to return, reminding Britain of promises made and broken. But the empire had no intention of letting its most troublesome king rise again. In 1891, Britain finally relented, allowing Jaja to return to Opobo. He set sail for Africa, but he would never arrive. Somewhere along the way, the king fell mysteriously ill. Some say it was disease, others whisper it was poison. What is certain is this: King Jaja of Opobo died in foreign lands, denied the return to the homeland he had fought to protect. But death did not silence him. Jaja's name became legend. The boy taken as a slave had risen to king. The merchant who defied an empire became a symbol of dignity, resistance, and resilience. Today, his name lives on in schools, streets, and memories across Nigeria. His defiance foreshadowed the struggles that would one day win independence. The British thought they had erased him, but more than a century later, King Jaja of Opobo remains a symbol of a people's unbreakable spirit and of the eternal truth that no empire can chain the will to be free.
Echoes of the ancients.
From the vast savannas of the Sahel to the dusty trade routes of Kano, from caravan towns humming with scholars to battlefields that forged destiny, this is the story of one of Africa's most powerful and enduring empires. Welcome to Echoes of the Ancients, and to the saga of the Sokoto Caliphate, the last great Islamic empire of West Africa. Long before the name Sokoto commanded respect across the Sudan belt, the region was home to a mosaic of ancient kingdoms, the Hausa city-states. Kano, Katsina, Zazzau, Gobir, and others thrived as centers of commerce and craftsmanship. By the 18th century, these city-states had become wealthy through trans-Saharan trade, exporting leather, textiles, slaves, and gold. Yet their wealth was matched by deep social inequality. Rulers taxed heavily, wars between states were frequent, and Islamic practice had blended with indigenous traditions. The faith was present, but reformers felt its spirit had dimmed. Among those reformers was a Fulani scholar born in 1754 near Marata in what is now northern Nigeria. His name, Usman Dan Fodio, a man of letters, purpose, and fiery conviction. He would soon ignite a movement that changed the destiny of an entire region. Usman Dan Fodio was not born a conqueror, he was a teacher, a malam who preached moral renewal and true adherence to Islamic principles. In the late 1700s, his sermons in Gobir attracted scholars, peasants and nomads alike. His words challenged corruption, oppression, and religious laxity, but reform can be dangerous when it threatens the throne. The Hausa rulers of Hausa ancient city kingdoms like Kano, Katsina, Zaria, Gobir, and Kebbi had grown rich, but also corrupt. Heavy taxes burdened the poor. Justice was sold to the highest bidder. Slavery and pagan practices had crept into the heart of Islamic society. Usman ibn Fudi was raised in a world of learning. By his youth, he had mastered Arabic, Islamic law, and theology. He studied under renowned teachers of the Qadiriyya order, absorbing both spirituality and scholarship. He traveled through Hausaland, preaching reform, denouncing corruption, and calling rulers back to Islamic principles. His words struck a chord among the poor, the scholars, and even the women of the region. His movement grew quietly, like a flame spreading under dry grass. By the late 1790s, the rulers of Gobir saw Usman's popularity as a threat. King Yunfa, who had once been Usman's pupil, turned against him. He restricted his preaching, banned conversions, and even attempted to assassinate him. When Yunfa's soldiers attacked his followers in the town of Gimbana, the scholar took up the mantle of leadership, not as a conqueror, but as a mujahid, a warrior in defense of faith. The Sokoto Jihad had begun. In 1804, Usman Dan Fodio and his followers, known as the Jama'ah, fled to Gudu. There, he declared a new Islamic community and called on all who sought justice to join the cause. Thousands answered. From Gudu, the reformers launched a series of campaigns across Hausa land. One by one, the Hausa kingdoms fell. Kebbi, Katsina, Kano, each toppled under the banner of reform and unity. Usman Dan Fodio's movement was not simply a war, it was an idea. His commanders, including his brother Abdullahi and his son Muhammad Bello, led with discipline and purpose. They built new centers of learning wherever they went. By 1808, the last of the Hausa kings had been defeated. The old order was gone. In its place stood a new empire, the Sokoto Caliphate. Usman Dan Fodio, now known as the Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful, founded the caliphate in 1809. Its capital was established at Sokoto, a modest town that would soon become the heart of West African Islam. Unlike the empires of Europe or the dynasties of old, the Sokoto Caliphate was built on both spiritual and administrative foundations. It was a federation of emirates, each led by appointed emirs, bound by law, faith, and allegiance to the caliph. Usman soon withdrew from active rule, dedicating his final years to writing and teaching. His works, more than 100 in number, covered law, ethics, governance, and theology, influencing generations to come. Under Muhammad Bello, Usman's son and successor, the caliphate entered its golden age. Trade routes flourished, linking the empire to Timbuktu, Tripoli, and the Atlantic coast. Cities like Kano became centers of learning and industry, producing cloth, leather, and books that were prized across Africa. The caliphate was vast, stretching nearly 100,000 square miles and governing over 10 million people. Yet its unity rested not on force alone, but on shared belief, education, and law. For a time, it seemed that Sokoto had achieved what many thought impossible. An empire ruled by the pen and the sword, guided by the Quran. By the mid-19th century, the Sokoto Caliphate had reached its zenith. It stood as the largest state in West Africa, a federation of more than 30 emirates. Bound by law, faith, and scholarship, the capital, Sokoto, became both a spiritual and intellectual beacon. Scholars from as far as Bornu, Timbuktu, and the Niger Bend journeyed there to study. The city's mosques rang with Quranic recitation. Its libraries overflowed with manuscripts. Under Sultan Muhammad Bello, the caliphate's second ruler, learning became the foundation of governance. Judges, teachers, and administrators were appointed based on merit and piety, not birthright. The Sokoto Caliphate was a rare blend of Islamic theocracy and decentralized federation. Each emirate enjoyed autonomy, but all swore allegiance to the caliph and followed Sharia as interpreted by the scholars of Sokoto. At the heart of this system lay the concept of maslaha, the pursuit of public good. Judges resolved disputes with fairness, taxation was standardized, and justice was expected to serve even the humblest farmer. This commitment to moral order earned the caliphate legitimacy that no sword alone could secure. The caliphate's wealth did not come from plunder, but from trade and production. Kano's weavers produced some of the finest dyed cloth in Africa. Zaria's leatherwork reached markets in North Africa. Agricultural reform spread new methods of irrigation and animal husbandry. Across the empire, caravan routes connected farmers, artisans, and merchants to the wider Islamic world. Slaves, though part of the economy, were often integrated into households or used in agriculture. a practice that drew later criticism, but was regulated by religious law. But the empire was not without its contradictions. The institution of slavery, inherited from earlier Hausa and Islamic traditions, expanded under the caliphate. Enslaved labor supported agriculture and administration. By some estimates, up to 2 million people lived in bondage, a stark reminder that even empires of faith could be bound by the ethics of their age. To travelers and traders, the caliphate appeared orderly, learned, and devout, a realm sustained by the rhythm of prayer, study, and commerce. Unlike many contemporary empires, the Sokoto Caliphate valued the education of women. Usman dan Fodio's daughter, Nana Asma'u, became one of the most influential female scholars in African history. She wrote in Arabic, Fulfulde, and Hausa, training women educators known as the Yantaru. Those who gathered together, they spread literacy and religious knowledge across the empire's farthest frontiers. Her legacy became the Caliphate's silent revolution, a movement that empowered minds even as swords secured borders. To the east, the Kanem-Bornu Empire remained independent but wary. To the south, Yoruba kingdoms traded intermittently. Diplomacy and trade rather than conquest defined these relationships. Yet beneath the surface, new threats brewed. In the late 19th century, the age of European imperialism was closing in. Explorers began mapping the interior, followed swiftly by armies and flags. The Sokoto leadership, proud and secure, underestimated the storm that was about to sweep across Africa. By the 1890s, the British, French, and Germans had divided West Africa on European maps, lines drawn without knowledge or consent of the peoples who lived there. Northern Nigeria was declared a British protectorate, though Sokoto's rulers never agreed to such terms. In 1903, British forces under Frederick Lugard marched on Sokoto. The Caliph, Atahiru I, refused to surrender the Caliphate's independence. He and his followers fled, determined to continue the jihad in exile. Atahiru's flight ended tragically in Burma, where he and his loyalists were killed. The Sokoto Caliphate, after a century of rule, was no more. Though the Caliphate's political power fell, its spiritual and intellectual influence endured. The British established the Sokoto Sultanate Council, recognizing the Sultan's authority in religious and cultural matters. A compromise that allowed continuity beneath colonial rule. Islam remained deeply rooted in northern Nigeria, its law, education, and identity shaped by the memory of the Caliphate. The Emirates survived, not as sovereign states, but as cultural beacons linking the past to the present. Even today, the Sokoto Sultanate remains a voice of moral guidance, the living echo of a vanished empire. The Sokoto Caliphate was more than a state. It was a vision that knowledge could govern power and that faith could build civilization. Its story reminds us that Africa's past is not a blank page written by outsiders, but a library of its own genius, reform, and resilience. Empires fall, but ideas endure. From the sands of Sokoto to the classrooms of today, the call of knowledge still echoes through the ages. You've been watching the last great Islamic empire of West Africa, Sokoto Caliphate, and Echoes of the Ancients production. If you've enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep the echoes of the past alive. Echoes of the Ancients, where history lives again.
Despite decades of resistance, the balance of power was slowly shifting. The British Empire possessed vast resources, industrial weapons, and an expanding colonial administration. One by one, the independent states of the region were brought under imperial control, some through war, some through treaties, some through deception. King Jaja of Apobo was exiled by the British in 1887 after refusing to surrender his control of trade. Nana Alamu's territories were attacked and eventually subdued by British forces. Lagos became a British colony. And in the early 20th century, the Sokoto Caliphate itself was defeated during the British conquest of northern Nigeria. By 1914, the diverse kingdoms and empires of the region had been merged into a single colonial entity, Nigeria. But the stories of these leaders did not disappear. Their resistance became part of a much larger legacy, a reminder that the expansion of empire was never uncontested, and that across Africa, powerful rulers fought to defend their independence against one of the most powerful empires in human history. The British Empire may have conquered their lands, but the courage of these rulers remains a powerful chapter in Africa's history, one that the world is only beginning to rediscover. History often remembers empires, but it does not always remember those who stood against them. In the rivers of the Niger Delta, in the lagoons of Lagos, in the trade cities of the coast, and across the vast savanna of the Sokoto Caliphate, African rulers, merchants, and warriors resisted one of the most powerful empires the world had ever known. They fought with strategy, with courage, and with the determination to defend their sovereignty. Though the British Empire eventually conquered their lands, their resistance remains a powerful chapter in African history, a chapter that reminds us that the story of Africa was never one of silence or surrender. It was a story of power, of resistance, and of leaders who refused to bow to empire. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Echoes of the Ancients for more forgotten stories of Africa's great civilizations, empires, and legendary leaders. And tell us in the comments, which African rulers should we explore next? Because many of the most powerful stories in history are still waiting to be told. This has been Echoes of the Ancients, where the voices of history still speak.